Buenos días a todos al diálogo de saber.
Good morning. To application of indigenous knowledge in water management, best practice models. Dear leaders and community members, on behalf of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, we welcome you to the workshop Applying Indigenous Knowledge in Water Management Best Practices Matter. Water is a vital resource that sustains all life in our Mother Earth. It is the connection that all living things have. Indigenous peoples around the world have had a special relationship with water built on our ways of life and subsistence that goes back to many generations. Our ancestors used their ancestral knowledge systems to address environmental challenges, and that it is why we now need to look for ways to restore our traditional knowledge and ways to address new future challenges that await us and in traditional ways in order to look for the future. The objective of this dialogue of knowledge is to create and provide an ethical space for respectful exchange that, in addition to allowing learning, will enable Indigenous communities from diverse regions of North America to share their knowledge, experiences, and lessons learned in freshwater management. At CC, we consider the role that the Indigenous peoples play in the protection of nature to be crucial, and we are committed to promoting the participation of Indigenous peoples in our actions and processes to help us prevent major environmental challenges in the North American region as well as worldwide. I would like to thank the people who have made this event possible, and we hope that it will be to your complete satisfaction. I would especially like to thank the Indigenous leaders and the representatives who have written to us from all the regions in North America in sharing their cases. I also would like to thank the uh, traditional ecological knowledge expert groups at the CC who are with us today. We remind you that this event will be translated into the three languages, English, Spanish, and French. To switch to the language of your choice, please use the globe symbol at the bottom of your screen. We also kindly ask our distinguished panelists to please keep your microphones turned off while they are not speaking. To begin the program, um, and with this event, I would like to invite Professora Cecia Esther Chuk-Uk, member of the CC Tech Experts Group, to perform a ceremony of invocation and respect for our peoples. Professor Cecia is a social anthropologist from the Autonomous University of Yucatan and a PhD candidate on Mesoamerican Studies at the Autonomous University in Mexico. She is currently a researcher at the Autonomous University of Campeche. Her current research work is guided to the use of honey and beeswax with an approach that encompasses the symbolic, ritual, medicinal and nutritional meanings of honey. Cecia Chuk has also written books for the teaching of the Maya language and is the author of numerous studies of Maya culture. Go ahead, Cecia. Thank you to all. Greetings from the Mayam in Southeast.
Oxlahum pilin sut binu beta pishanti tu bapach ik. Oxlahum pilin sut binu beta pishanti tu bapach luum. Tush walak balech. Tush muka angatuch. Yash dichil abak el tialuhan tiklumil. Yash bolil utialmak ku ahkanantiko apishan. Dichil hanal tialunatsil luum. A winklil. Tiala kastik u yoch a winklil. Kabei chahak. Tiala kastik ichilusasilha inohoch tonod. Kabay chahak tialakashtik tuush kuwak alkak kuyelel ichiltawotoch. Kabay chahak tialakashtik ichilutomos chiik. Kabay chahak tialakashtik ichilubokil luum. Kutsaba okelbi yanusut achibal wayo olkabe. 13 vueltas hará tu espíritu alrededor.
13 turns will your spirit make around the water cenote. 13 round trips will make your spirit around the fire. 13 turns will make your spirit around air. 13 turns your spirit will make around the earth. There where you are standing, there where your belly button was put, the first meat for the earth, a tribute destined for the protectors of your soul, food, sacred food for the mother originally from your body. And in order to look for the support of your body, either you find it in the clear water of the very, very large cenote, or you find it in the fire spirit that burns in your home, or you find it in the wind, or you find it in the smell of the earth that with your semen returns, announces the return of your heritage. A poet and Mayan writer from Campeche, November 2022. Until another sun. We would like to thank Cecia Esther Okuk, member of the expert group on traditional ecological knowledge, for the opening ceremony. Thank you. Next, I am pleased to give the floor to Kathy Hutchins-Smith, spokesperson for the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Expert Group, who will give us a few welcoming remarks. Kathy is a Saskatoon lawyer practicing criminal and Indigenous law and represents the Métis Legal Research and Education Foundation. She has litigated in court at all levels, including the Provincial Court, Federal Court of Appeals, among others, and is a co-counsel in the Supreme Court of Canada. She has been involved with the Métis National Council in various initiatives, such as the Indigenous Human Resources Development Strategy, roundtables between Canada, Aboriginal roundtables, and among other matters. And she has done research work for the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the Canadian Education Association, and the Learning Council of Canada. Kathy, go ahead.
Good morning and welcome. I speak today from the traditional territory of the Cree, the Saulteaux, the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota peoples, and from the homeland of the Métis Nation. I bring remarks this morning on behalf of the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Expert Group. We are representatives from across North America. Our work began with a large gathering in Mexico City of traditional knowledge holders from across North America. We are responsible to find ways to increase Indigenous knowledge inclusion in the work of environment management under CEC. In the context of CEC, we have considered and shared the many pressing issues facing our communities. We have reflected on the core aspects of our spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional health. We've reflected on the importance of Mother Earth and all of the benefits that we draw from her. We have reflected upon our responsibilities as Indigenous peoples to maintain the long-standing relationships of our nations and the various aspects and species of life, to protect the habitats and health of all aspects of Mother Earth. At the core of the teachings, we have reflected the value of water. Water is life. Water is at the core of the well-being of all life, of all peoples, of all communities, and it is the future of our grandchildren. We recognize the close relationship between water and the birthing and spawning areas of the various species, the migratory aspects of all species. We are all vulnerable. Our traditional life is vulnerable to proper water management, the proper management of fresh water. This exchange today arises from our need to listen and learn together, to share our approaches to water management to ensure the best possible advice to the CEC. We welcome you. We acknowledge your excellent and hard work on behalf of your communities and all humanity. We look forward to your thoughts on the best approach to inclusion of Indigenous values and knowledge in freshwater management regimes. All my relations.
Agradecemos las palabras de Kathy Hodson Smith, vocera del grupo de
We
expertos.
would like to thank Kathy for her words. Thank you very much, Kathy. Continuing with the program, it is a pleasure to have in this space Marcela Orozco, head of the Consultative Bodies and Business Participation Unit. Marcela Orozco has more than 25 years of experience in international and governmental affairs, dedicating a large part of her professional career to environmental policy and cooperation issues, multi-sectoral relations, promotion of foreign investment projects, and international trade. She currently manages the advisory work of one of the three bodies of this commission and develops strategies to increase public participation in international fora and public consultations of the Joint Public Advisory Committee. Marcela will now give us an overview of the organization and the work we do with the expert group on traditional ecological knowledge. Go ahead, Marcela, welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Yolanda, for your presentation. I'm going to change to English.
Recognize the presence of Kathy Hodson Smith, Cecia, our other TEK members, and our invited speakers who are joining us here today from different locations within North America. It is truly an honor to be a part of this event, and I am pleased to provide you with a very quick overview of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, better known as the CEC, and the important work carried out by the TEK expert group, including their project on the indigenous approaches to freshwater management in North America. Next slide. The CEC was established in 1994 by the NAFTA side agreement, known as the NACE, North American Agreement on Environmental Cooperation, with the entry into force on the 1st of July, 2020 of the new trilateral free trade agreement, better known as the CUSMA, TMEC, or USMCA, and the new Environmental Cooperation Agreement, ECA. The three countries renewed their commitment to the CEC and charted ways forward to continue working together to address pressing regional and global issues. Next slide. The CEC's mission is to facilitate effective cooperation and public participation to conserve, protect, and enhance the North American environment in support of sustainable development for the benefit of present and future generations. For almost 30 years, the CEC has proven to be a unique organization promoting a regional approach to environmental cooperation and creating linkages between stakeholders across the continent to address emerging and complex environmental and sustainable development issues. Next slide. The CEC continues to have three constituent bodies. The Council, which is the governing body of the CEC, and that is comprised by cabinet level or equivalent representatives responsible for environmental affairs for the parties. The Joint Public Advisory Committee, better known as the JPAC, which provides advice to the Council and is the core mechanism for stakeholder engagement and public participation in CEC activities, and is now comprised of 9 volunteer citizens, 3 from each country. And of course, the Secretariat, headquartered in Montreal, which provides technical, administrative, and operational support to the Council, committees, and working groups, which include government officials from the 3 countries. Next slide, please. The CEC has helped establish North American networks and build a wealth of expertise, tools, resources, and standards to support communities and governments in addressing common environmental challenges. The organization also facilitates the dialogue between decision makers on pressing topics and emerging issues affecting North America. It helps implement coordinated action and contribute to international environmental commitments. It also ensures government accountability regarding the enforcement of environmental laws. Next slide, please. The CEC 2021-2025 strategic plan further supports the objectives established by the parties under the ECA by building on cooperative work carried out under the NACE, while incorporating more ambitious areas of cooperation and commitments under the ECA. The strategic plan establishes council guidance and direction of the CEC's efforts for the 2021-2025 period. It guides the development of the CEC cooperative work, which includes specific projects and detailed initiatives. The strategic plan is comprised of the 6 thematic pillars that are showed right now in the current slide. Next slide, please. As Kathy mentioned, in 2015, the CEC created a traditional ecological knowledge expert group to provide advice on opportunities to apply TEK to the CEC's operations and policy recommendations and undertake any other activities as the council may request. The group is also comprised of 9 Indigenous volunteer representatives, 3 from each country, who represent different regions within North America. The CEC is committed to continue enhancing the engagement of the TEK expert group and Indigenous peoples in our work to advance the integration of Indigenous perspectives and Indigenous-led stewardship practices across all CEC operations to address our shared social and economic concerns. At the recent council session that took place in Merida, the council endorsed a 300,000 Canadian dollar initiative to be led by the group to address threats to food security by increasing our understanding of traditional Indigenous practices and knowledge related to food systems. This initiative is currently under development and its implementation is expected to begin early next year. Next slide, please. Now to the current purpose of our meeting today, the TEK-led project, Indigenous Approaches to Freshwater Management in North America. The project, as Kathy mentioned, reflects a dialogue that took place between members over several months, during which they pointed to water as being at the core of the 6 pillars in the new CEC strategic plan. Water is seen as central to the spiritual, cultural, and personal aspects of Indigenous peoples' ways of life, and these holistic relationships can inform traditional approaches to sustainable management. The TEK expert group members felt that reflecting upon these unique perspectives can contribute to innovative approaches for water management within the CEC. The proposal has 2 main objectives and key outcomes. The first is to document Indigenous approaches to freshwater management in North America with specific attention to water management through traditional Indigenous approaches. The second, to inform and educate Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities throughout North America on ways to increase freshwater system sustainability and resiliency through Indigenous wisdom and practice. Next slide. Next slide. This initiative has 4 key activities and outputs. The first is documentation of case studies. The second is the online dialogue that we're hosting today. The third is a tri-national Indigenous workshop. And the fourth, an online portal on the CEC website. Next slide. For the first activity, the TEK expert group identified a series of case studies that will center on exploring Indigenous relationships to water management through the use of TEK in different ecological environments, such as coastal Indigenous communities, arid climate Indigenous communities, also northern and mountainous contexts. The main objective will be for the CEC to consider these Indigenous core values and approaches to water management that can be transferable to the overall work of the organization. Next slide. The second activity, which is the one that is taking place today, is our online knowledge dialogue on freshwater related Indigenous traditional community practices in North America. We were extremely pleased to have received a high number of submissions when we launched our call earlier last month, and are honored to have the representatives of the case studies that were selected showcase their work during this event today. The expected deliverable will be an executive report on the outcomes of today's proceedings. Next slide. The third activity will center on a tri-national Indigenous workshop to examine the outcomes of the case studies and the online dialogue. This workshop will involve water experts in the 3 countries, including representatives of the parties, JPAC members, private sector representatives, and NGOs. The deliverable expected will be a TEK expert group assessment report to the council on potential opportunities to apply TEK to the CEC's operations and policy recommendations. Next slide. Lastly, these activities will culminate with the creation of an online portal on the CEC's website, showcasing Indigenous perspectives on freshwater management and sustainable use that can inform government, agencies, or communities working on freshwater conservation. The online portal on the CEC's website will include videos with interviews, stories, public discussion on inclusive and innovative approaches to freshwater management, examples of the inclusion of TEK in various projects or approaches, and an online comment section for continuous discussion on the subject. This wraps up my intervention, and I would like to encourage all of the participants today to continue following the important group of this unique expert group and to stay tuned for more CEC Indigenous activities and initiatives next year. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Merci.
Muchas gracias, Marcela Orozco, titular de la Unidad de Órganos.
Thank you. Many thanks to Marcela Orozco, head of the Consultative Bodies and Business Participation Unit, for introducing us and telling us a little bit about our work in the CEC. To continue, I would like to tell you that we're going to receive your questions through slido.com. This is an app. In order to use this app, you can scan with your mobile this QR code, and through Slido and text type your questions, or you can use the code that you can see on the bottom. So we're going to try to address all your questions during this workshop, and especially in the Q&A session that will be at the end. Thank you so much for the members, for the attendance of the members of the group of experts in traditional ecological knowledge who are with us. And especially, I would like to thank them for your dedication and time that you dedicate to the traditional ecological knowledge. I would like to welcome our distinguished panel members who will be presenting different cases in North America. We will be hearing cases from Canada, from the Aqualminte Sequepem community, as well as Smith's Landing First Nation and the Equanimity Quebec. And in Mexico, we have the community from the San Juan Achutla peoples, the Pasiaco, Oaxaca. We have the community of El Porvenir, Municipal Agency of San Jose del Progreso in Oaxaca. From the United States, we're going to have the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. To start with, and due to the different times that we have in North America, we're going to start with Canada. So I would like to start with a cultural exchange between Aina Ulu Awamu and Guamini Sequepem. The presentation will be provided by Lee Morrison, and Lynn is a member of the First Nations web and student of the practices on the community loops from Sequepem, from the Aquaminte Sequepem collective. Go ahead, please, Lynn.
Huaita ka huaita, blen ren squest, to sink to aquin, to kamups remutwin. Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn, and I am from the Sink First Nations on my dad's side and have been a humbled guest on Tecumseh to Sequemic the majority of my life and where I am sitting right now. I would just like to thank everyone for their presence today and all the knowledge and dialogue that's going to occur. I'm very much looking forward to it. So today I will be sharing on the Selka Vai Water Guardians Exchange, what took place over the course of 2 days this past July with the presence of elders, knowledge keepers, and youth from both partnering groups. Next slide, please. Cultural Exchange was a partnership between KUA, a grassroots organization addressing on-the-ground needs of food sovereignty and land management practices in Hawaii, and Qualmita Sequemic's Knowledge Builders Program and High School Summer Guardians, continuing on the work of the Water Guardians from 2019. The purpose of the exchange was to engage in maintaining and sustaining cultural practices that protect water for future generations by connecting the elders to youth and sharing cross-culturally. By bringing together two Indigenous groups through the form of a virtual global cafe, the transference of Indigenous knowledge otherwise not experienced in traditional schools was able to occur, and with the participation from membership in rural communities. Furthermore, as both groups face detrimental impacts to their culture and language as a result of colonialism, the exchange provided a safe learning opportunity for both groups to share their cultural practices, language, and lived experiences with each other. Prior to the exchange taking place, members from the team sat with signatory elders, listening to the importance of water in spiritual and ceremonial practices and to our way of life. Through these sit-downs, the understanding of water exceeded the realm of commodity and being the life-sustaining force expressed earlier today, and shared how the ability to drink selkla directly from the water source has changed in their lifetime, affecting their way of life. Next slide, please. The first day of the exchange was grounded in honoring our past and the voices of our elders. By standing up and respecting each one's elders, prayers, and cultures, we were able to start off the exchange in a good way. Grounding the groups through the use of language and ceremony set the stage for a successful transference of knowledge that has been left out of colonial textbooks and education systems. By implementing traditional practices through prayer and chants, the next generation of youth were able to experience a more intimate and fulsome learning to sustainable water management practices. Through the guidance of elders, the exchange was grounded in reciprocity, respect, and the importance of water to all connections of life. Leading up to the exchange, the Team Scoopkin High School Summer Guardians and Knowledge Builder mentors took part in researching the Siptex, which are ancestral tellings passed on from the generations prior. The story chosen to be shared was that of the story of the salmon boy, as seen in the drawing in the left-hand corner. The Summer Guardians participated in sharing the story of a boy who fell into a river and was transformed to the world of salmon and himself a salmon. Only through following the guidance of King Salmon and patience until the right time was the boy able to return upstream safely. Not only that, but from careful observation from the grandfather who was fishing, he was able to recognize the eyes of his grandson and kept him alive with care for him to return to human form. The high school summer guardians brought the story to life through their artistic creations and shared the telling at the exchange with Kua. For both groups, the cross-generational knowledge transference was refreshing to experience as the elders were able to pass on their own teachings to the next generation while also learning the languages and practices of Kua's own elders and youth. Next slide. Day 2 was focused on honoring our youth, present and future, strengthening the cross-generational knowledge transference. In keeping off with starting in a good way, both groups grounded the work through prayers and respect for the connection of water to our way of life. The discussion from this day was centered on understanding the struggles that communities are currently facing and providing ways to address them. For both groups, returning to the land, learning language, and cultural practices were methods to be implemented. During the summer guardians were presented the BC Tomorrow simulation tool, which helps to understand the process of sustainable planning to land use and changes to watersheds on past and future landscapes. Part of their assignment was to address the levels of water in forestry for a sustainable future. In the bottom right corner, you can see how the students used the simulator and increased environmental and socioeconomic indicators to achieve their simulation goals. Next slide, please. Leading up to the exchange, members from the team participated in one-on-one interviews with signatory members and knowledge keepers. Through this, knowledge was able to be recorded, adding to the preservation and transference of traditional knowledge. Through the research of ancestral tellings, the voices of our elders were able to be heard and shared at the exchange. The relationship of water to naming was a common thread to both groups, with QS sharing how water is found in the naming of women and Kua to place names. The virtual exchange highlighted current risk factors, which are impacting both communities directly. A few of the noted features include the impact of urbanization and commercial expansion from major companies, impacting water sources, access, and cultural ways. Furthermore, grappling with the effects of colonization and current colonial practices, which are not truly representative of Indigenous voices who have lived off the land since time immemorial. Next slide, please. As mentioned throughout the presentation, language was at the core of this exchange and a big factor in building the partnership between both groups. Having both groups learn and speak their traditional tongues was an amazing experience and enriched the learning. Coming to learn that vai vai, meaning wealthy, was the duplication of the word water, highlighted the significance of water in our lives and the great value and importance water has and should be respected as being. Next slide, please. Here is a snapshot from one of the jam boards the group collectively participated in. Being able to have the input from the elders as well as the youth from both communities in this media was a great tool to interact and share our findings with each other, as it also highlighted the similarities between both groups. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are many challenges facing communities as a result of the history of colonization, which include urbanization, colonial governance structures, and pollution. Some of the lessons learned from this exchange was the importance of community-led action who have on-the-ground experience in addressing these risks. By strengthening our partnership with Indigenous communities through the inclusion of elders and youth in dialogues, substantive change can be made for future generations. Furthermore, bringing together two Indigenous groups and sharing their lived experiences, the language, and ways of life was reaffirming to the truth of our own laws and teaching. As the understanding and perspective of water surpasses economic gain into that of Indigenous laws, the implementation of traditional Indigenous practices needs to be included and received in discussion and educational practices. Next slide. Awesome. And this is just two snapshots from our exchange with our summer guardians. It was a wonderful experience and a great learning opportunity for both groups, and we look forward to continuing on the work we reached us.
Muchísimas gracias por tu presentación,
Thank
Lynn.
you so much for your presentation, Lynn, and thank you, Darlene, for sharing with us your experience about Indigenous knowledge and the significance of bringing together the elders with with the young people so that knowledge can be shared. We would like to remind you that we are receiving questions through Slido. Slido is an app. We're going to share the QR code with all of you. You can access. Let's continue with the agenda. We will now present the case of the Bati Dene Souliné through Cardinal. He is from the Kikino Metis settlement group. She has seen many changes to the lands and waters in her region, as well as a drastic decrease in wildlife. She loves listening to elders talk about knowledge and know what the land was like before she was born. Jessie has done social work and she has been the coordinator and director of many environmental groups. The title of her presentation is Water and is Sacred and We Should All Protect It. Go ahead, Jessie.
Bueno, aparentemente Jessie está teniendo algunos problemas de conexión.
Apparently, Jessie has connection problems, so we will continue with the next panelist. And if she would connect later on, we will give her the opportunity so that she can make a presentation. Then we will continue with the other case of Canada. We will hear the case of Equachini, Quebec, with the presentation recognition of the Magpie River as a legal entity in Canada by Pierre-Olivier Boutroux. Pierre is the Director of Conservation of Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society of the Quebec section. He is responsible for the campaign for the protection of Magpie River in Quebec and coordinated the initiative for the recognition of the river's rights in partnership with the International Observatory of the Rights of Nature and the Alliance Mukechapa Chipu. Pierre?
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci à Yolanda Lopez Maldonado et à la Commission de coopération environnementale pour l'invitation. Très apprécié. Merci de l'opportunité de parler en français, qui est la langue maternelle. Donc, je vais commencer en vous posant une question.
So I will start asking a question, and the natural means, like any human being. This is a question that is at the depth of the story that I'm going to tell you today. So I belong to an environmental group that is called the Society for the Protection of the Parks that we have in Canada. And a few years, I formed an alliance with the Sisinu, with Kinchu, and with different municipalities and different community groups. And the objective of our alliance is to protect a river that is called the Magpie River. In the Innu, its language is a river that is in the province of Quebec in Canada. And then I belong to this alliance. And this is why I'm going to present the story. So we will go to the next slide. In February of last year, in 2021, there was news that traveled all over the world. We had a first river in Canada that was that had the first river in Canada that had legal rights. It was now a legal person. And this took many years of work. And this is news that went all over the world. And in fact, this started many years before. Next, please. And then here, this is a photograph of the Magpie River. And this is a river of almost 300 kilometers that is acknowledged at an international level because of the activities like sports activities, kayak and white river rafting. This is a river, a natural river that is present in the boreal forest of Canada, and we have been working for 15 years to protect this river. Well, why? Well, because the river has gone through the hydroelectric development. They wanted to build a dam here, and obviously they know that we have rapids and cascades, and we worked to create protection with regards to this river. And the idea to acknowledge the rights of the river, and it is born from the government of Quebec, as well as the Hydro-Quebec, which is a state-owned company to develop energy in Quebec. And the government of Canada did not want to protect the river for future generations and Hydro-Quebec. So we looked for an alternative, and we had this idea. With the movement of the rights of nature that we have at an international level, between 2017, 2018, we looked for a way to protect the river. And it was coming from the leadership of the local communities, the First Nations, and also the municipalities that were present in this territory. Next, please. Here you can see that the National Geographic establishes the river Magpie as the main rivers of the world. As I was saying, we did a lot of demonstrations to protect the river, studies, and we organized night conferences and expeditions to, or field trips to the river. And we noticed that after a year, the government was carrying out other activities. And this idea to acknowledge the rights of the river for us was a way of working with the government. And here, the traditional knowledge, the indigenous traditional communities to acknowledge. We have operations here that were voted by the Inuit First Nation first, and second by the municipality that is called Mangani, where the Magpie River is located. Here you can see extracts from these two resolutions, very concrete, of 15 to 20 pages, that are full of references, legal references at a national level of the right of the Canadians and also Quebec. And next slide, please. And here in the content of these resolutions at the part one, the part one is identifies the Magpie River at the Matke Chipon, and the second establishes the link between the river and the First Nations. And 3 years had to go by in order to have actions and to obtain these resolutions. So it was clear that the traditional knowledge for the river through the communities. This is in Quebec. The rivers are what allow us to travel from north to south during winter, and then they become a kind of highway. So we have this use of the water by the First Nations, but they are in the resolutions, but it is a very important this is a very important element in order to make sure that the rights of this river were acknowledged. That, as you can see in this slide, we have 9 rights that were acknowledged, through these resolutions. So we can talk about the right to travel freely, but we also have a very important right, which is the last one, which is the right to take legal action, the rights of the river. Now we have a tool in the community in order to present, um, to go before the courts and to protect the Magpie River, eh, which could damage the rights of the river. Now, I don't have too much time to talk about the right, but in the next stages, after a year of stating the rights of the river, we have been working to name the guardians for this river. And the river, since the river cannot be presented to the courts, so during all this process, we have people who have an impact with regards to the governance of the river, and the indigenous communities in this case, and they know the notion of guardians since since ancient times. So we continue working with the Quebec government in order to acknowledge on their behalf the river as an entity protected within its own legislation. And this is the story that I wanted to tell you today. Thank you for your attention. And it is a pleasure to be sharing with you. Thank you for your interesting presentation, and also by bringing to this event the importance of connecting other knowledge systems, and also how we can connect to other legal systems. And once again, thank you very much. On the screen, you have the QR code so that we can receive your questions and answers. And if you cannot have access to this code, you can also do it through the Slido application with the TEK 2022 code. Continuing with the programming, now we will hear the cases of Mexico. So we are going to the community of the San Juan Achutla from Tlaxiaco, Oaxaca. In the case Muchita Nisa, practices and traditional knowledge with regards to water in the community of San Juan Achutla, Tlaxiaco, Oaxaca. The presentation is in charge of Chef Adriana Martinez Mendez. Adriana is an intercultural manager by the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She has several diplomas focused on community culture and preservation of intangible heritage by UNESCO. She has participated in publications and educational programs disseminating areas of cultural relationship with plants and biocultural memory. Daughter of migrants from the Oaxacan Mixteca and the Otomí area in the state of Mexico. She is currently working as head of department of the National Water Commission. Adriana. Thank you very much. I just want to verify that when we have good audio, it's correct. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for this time, so that it is an environment to have a dialogue regarding traditional knowledge. I would like to tell you that we are a community where with traditional knowledge are basic for the communities. Next, please. I would like to start with the traditional knowledge is not a local knowledge. It is universal knowledge expressed locally. And in each one of the culture, the knowledge, it goes to different environments of life. And therefore, this is why we had this phrase from Daryl Posey. I would like to tell you a little bit to go back to San Juan Achutla. San Juan Achutla is a municipality located in the northwestern part of the state of Oaxaca. It belongs to the district of Tlaxiaco. Its constitution dates back in 1942, and it has the denomination of indigenous town. However, a large percentage of the population stopped practicing the Mixteca language in the last 50 years. To get an idea of this community or of this pueblo, and the population is 408 inhabitants, 205 women, and 203 men, of which 103 are elder population. They are 65 years and older. I would like to mention that in this community, there is the presence of migration towards the city, to Mexico City, and to areas like Ixtapalapa and areas like Ixtaquepec and in the state of Mexico. And there is a strong migration, international migration. Next, please. A little bit of the image of how this community looks like. And this is a panoramic view. Next, please. This is also a photo of the rich vegetation. And I would like to talk about a lake that is a river, I'm sorry, a river that goes from the central part of this community. And this is what we're going to mention. The next one, please. In this sense, I would also like to mention that based on family narratives of people who are in this community and in these families, these are relatives, and they are part of this community, and they are in the presence that it is important to acknowledge the knowledge of water. And with these three experiences, we generate this presentation. Okay, so what I was mentioning, based on family narratives, research on biocultural memory around water as a significant element in the community was carried out based on traditional knowledge and practices of local character. It is important to mention that water is focused on symbolic, and it is within the narratives and the memories of the community. And next, please. Here, I'm going to take a fragment of that interview. There, why are you interested? And these are the times that I remember. Water was taken. I'm not a young anymore, but in my head, I also think about. I also jump like a cricket, and the proximity that through the water we have. And well, this is a fragment of what Luz Carmen Mendez is remembering, 53 years old. The memory of what earth is present. The rocks are my mountains, the mud my territory, and the moss my inhabitants. It is the summer of 1972, and my whole world unfolds in that river. Every day I notice the changes in the color of the rocks, in the smell of the trees, and in the textures of the sand. Today, only the memory of El Lagucho lives in my memory, my beloved Lagucho. This is the river personalized, and these are the elements that are interconnected. Cosmos, the cosmos, the, they are united in order to be present in the memory of the community. Next, please. And here, I would like to mention the currents in which we are focusing this case. And this is the ecology, the uh, traditional knowledge. And according to Fayad in 2018, water can also be seen as a source of life, as an element that nurtures local and community knowledge, as well as a source of community values. This contradicts the utilitarian vision that focuses on water as a resource to be exploited and with it meet basic human needs. Water has a chemical composition and is present in different states in nature. So here we can see how these issues are faced. And here in this community, like I have repeated, there are symbolic elements that connect the memory between and in relation to this knowledge. I would like to go now to the last slide in order to focus directly on this task. Can you, the next slide?
This is knowledge. And the last slide, please. We're going to focus knowledge on the science philosophy, and it is extremely important to focus on the daily practice and how knowledge is clear in a historically structured context, but also in a specific culture. Is in the Mexican culture, and we're going to at this in a region, in the Mixtec region, and specifically, we're going to to see how this is developed in the different communities. I would like to conclude my presentation by talking about these five pillars that are present in the knowledge and biocultural knowledge and memory in water management. First is socialization and fun. River is part of the games and encounters in the river, recreational activities along the way. The rock becomes a trampoline. It is also a reflect. It is a recreational moment. So this is the part the pillar for socialization and fun. Knowledge of the environment. There is knowledge of the rocks, the earth, the flora and fauna, rain, and interrelated processes. This is closely related to the other pillars in terms of productive activities, the concrete interrelationship of the river with agricultural activities, livestock, and domestic animals. So we have these different pillars that are significant for traditional knowledge. Then we have social organization. There is a specific organization for its care, such as the stewardship and cleaning commissions. There are also blessings or ceremonies are related to the river. When there is a wedding or something sacred, there's the water is accompanies these ceremonies to celebrate life. And also there are certain ceremonies in which the community organizes to see if a community member is infringing or violating certain rules, such as using soap to wash clothes. So this makes the stewardship very effective. The symbol, the symbolic location, it's a moment anchors a memory. It also means tranquility, reflect on personal and family issues. The river becomes a shelter to cry, to reflect, or to make a significant decision in life. The river becomes uh, this shelter that pampers the members of the community. And I would like to reach the conclusions right now. And as Al- Lotman said, every culture defines the paradigm of what has to be remembered and what can be forgotten. This is very important because in this community, despite of the migratory changes, there is a memory that is being uh, taken into consideration in spite of the different processes that are taking place. In this town, the practices in terms of water improve their livelihood. So we can see some elements to value water, not only as a commodity, but as a symbolic act, as a semi-sphere that feeds practices, traditions, knowledge, and narratives of vital importance for the bicultural heritage in the communities, which is critical to disseminate strategies to continue with this in different countries. Thank you very much, and we hope this is a very useful dialogue for all of us. Thank you very much, Adriana Martinez Mendez, for the presentation on Icanisa practices and traditional knowledge from the San Juan Atriochas Glaciaco town. And thank you very much for providing this more theoretical vision on the different ways of conceiving water, not only as a resource that can be or a commodity, but also providing the value, the cultural or spiritual value, regardless of the community we're talking about. Thank you so much, Diana. Now let's continue with our presentations. We will now listen to the other case of Mexico, my country, the case of the community of El Porvenir, Municipal Agency of San Jose de Progreso, Oaxaca, in Mexico. The presentation is Sowing Water, Sowing Autonomy. The presentation is going to be delivered by Josefina Santiago. Josefina is an agroecology promoter in the Organización de Agricultores Biológicos, ACE, Organization of Biological Farmers. She has participated in various activities for the defense of native corn in Oaxaca and collaborated in the National Network in Defense of Native Corn or Maize. She is currently a member of the coordinator of Joint Peoples for taking
cual ha participado en diferentes foros de la reforma constitucional de los derechos de los
has
pueblos.
participated in different fora on the constitutional reform and the rights of indigenous people.
Fue acreedora al Premio Nacional a la Promoción de los Derechos de las Mujeres Indígenas Marta Sánchez Néstor, promovida por Mujeres del Instituto Nacional
and the National Institute for Indigenous Communities. Go ahead, Josefina. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. We are very happy to share the work that has taken place in our country and the specific work about Sembrar Agua, Sembrar Autonomy, sowing water, sowing autonomy. So we are part of the coordinator of Joint Peoples for the Community Defense. So I'm going to talk about the background first. We have been fighting for 17 years to defend water rights. Our movement started in 2005, derived from the invitation of Conagua to all farmers because we were going to pay some additional fees for water, some sanctions that were 1,000 pesos and even 2,400 pesos. So this led to all the community to organize because we were not extracting this water. There was a scarcity of water in our territory. So that triggered this movement, and we founded this organization. And the court ruling was favorable to us, and all our needs were addressed or started to be addressed. At the same time, we did not accept CONAGUA to impose fees and meters in our wells. So as farmers, we started fighting against this because we wanted to recover our aquifer and also wells. So we started working on water infiltration to the soil, and also this was strengthened by the indigenous spirituality through our ceremonies and rites. Through that process, as a community, we also created a rule in or a regulation in our community. So water is wisely used uh, to prevent any leaks or to prevent any monopoly in the use of water. So we want water to continue existing in our territory. With this hard work, um, we held many roundtables with the government, CONAGUA, which is the organization in charge of managing water in Mexico, and other organizations. We talked about, we also had roundtables with the United Nations, with the Indian organizations, and in 2015, the Federal Court of Justice gave us the opportunity to conduct a consultation among the communities on how we wanted our water to be managed, because there was a decree from 1967 that prevented us from polluting wells. So based on this indigenous consultation, we were able to create a decree that eliminated the 1967 decree, and now we have the ruling area of 2025, where the 16 communities are located, and water management and use. This decree was approved on November 24, 2021, just last year. And Articles 7 and 8 acknowledge our autonomy as communities, and that we have the right to manage, use, and enjoy water. It is a common good, and it's not a commodity. We don't have that commercial view. So these articles and that decree allowed us to have the first title of Indigenous Community Concession, where the no the water the right for the water use was granted to our communities. So we all have to manage and use water wisely, and that people that benefit from this water are the ones responsible for managing it. So there is no individual concession. It is a community concession with a future perspective. So we can continue having water in our communities in future generations. And we also, and also the community authorities were acknowledged. So we have a local community, which is the robust part of the communities. And then we have civil authorities and agricultural authorities that are the ones that represent the communities as such. So our work is focused on three models, which is harvesting water through the infiltration wells or collecting wells, also through containers, huge containers to collect water, and others. So This is indigenous spirituality. We are regaining respect for Mother Nature, community organization, recognition of rights over territory, internal regulations to access and take care of water through the internal regulation I mentioned before, realization of water collection works. This provides the right to the use, to water use management and enjoy. This decree allowed us to manage water and now this is a more comprehensive work in our region, and we always take care of water. So we have 500 works to collect water to the aquifer. We have, as I said, geomembranes, collection containers, absorption wells, among many other things. And this was done through our own funding. We have also received funding from IPI, which is the Organization for Indigenous Communities. And we have conducted this type of work, and Conagua only manages water but never sees how to get water for the future. So this is a new approach. Our work is focused not only on collecting water, but also defending our rights for the present and the future use of water. So this is all. So this is how the process has been developed, and thank you very much for your attention.
Gracias, Josefina, por traernos.
Josefina, thank you very much for this interesting case where you were able to address not only aspects related to the value we provide to water, but also to the community work, the importance of the techios from the First Nations point of view. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite Jessica Ardina. She is now with us. She was experiencing some connectivity issues, and she is going to tell us about her presentation. Jessie, can you hear us now?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Muy bien. Gracias. Bueno, les voy a leer un poco sobre Jessie. Jessie es del asentamiento Kikino Metis.
Jessie is from the Kikino Metis settlement. She grew up there. She has seen many changes to the lands and waters in her lifetime, as well as a drastic decrease in wildlife. She loves listening to elders talk about knowledge and protecting water. Jessie has done some social work, and she is the coordinator and director of many environmental groups. She will present water is sacred and we must work to protect it. So please go ahead, Jessie. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good morning, everyone. Tanse, Jesse Cardinal Natsigasun, Kikino Tsania, Keepers of the Water at Toskian. I am from the community of Kikino. It's located in Treaty 6 and 8 territory in what's colonially known as Canada. And I'm currently serving as the executive director for Keepers of the Water. If you can go to the next slide, please. So Keepers of the Water, it's a movement that was born during 2006 on the shores of the Decho, which is the Mackenzie River up in Northwest Territories. And the organization was formed in 2006 at that time because the Indigenous people were seeing that there was a change in the water quality and the water quantity. And this was due to extreme industrial extraction. So the Dene indigenous elders of the North got together with other people and they created a declaration. And the declaration states that water is sacred and that we must work to protect it. This is one of the founders of Keepers of the Water, Sam Gargan, and one of the other Keepers of the Water, late Henry Basil. And this is the area where the gathering happened. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm just trying to move to my next slide. So I'm here to talk to you today about the threats to water that we're facing in what's called Northern Canada. The Alberta tar sands is one of the biggest and most destructive projects on the planet. And so it's located in Alberta. It's home to numerous Indigenous communities and ecosystems. It's the biggest energy project in the world. It currently produces about 1.9 million barrels of oil a day. However, we believe that number has since gone up. It's a large enough project to, you can see it from space, and it's larger than the home country of some of the energy project's largest investors, such as England. So the size of it is larger than some of the countries in the world. The landscape has fallen victim to relentless industrial exploitation with poisoned water, deforestation, and 3 to 4 times more greenhouse gas emissions than where conventional oil is produced. And so I put up this picture because I wanted you guys to see that is the river there. It's called the Athabasca River. This is part of the tar sands, and you can see these little holding ponds. Those are called tailings ponds. Those are completely toxic chemicals, and they don't know how to treat them right now. So if anything lands on them, such as these ducks that you see, they will die. They're completely poisonous, and you can see how close it is to our rivers. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the tailings ponds. So the tailings ponds, are, as I stated, they are toxic. They're full of all kinds of chemicals. Right now, the government of Alberta, which is the colonial province of Alberta, and the oil companies are making a proposal that they want to start dumping the tailings ponds into the Athabasca River. This will flow into the Decho, which is another big river, and then into the Arctic Ocean. We as keepers of the water know that even after they say they can treat these tailings ponds, that they're still not safe, that they're still poisonous. And I just want to tell you really quickly a little bit more about the tailings ponds. Tailings are stored in these huge open lakes. They cover an area larger than the size of Vancouver. If some of you want to Google the city of Vancouver, they're just massive. There's 19 of these ponds. They're the size of a lake, and there's 19 of these in northern Alberta, and they keep getting bigger and bigger, and they don't know how to treat these. Like it's a huge environmental disaster right now. And so the solution that the companies are trying to do right now is just treat them a little bit and then start dumping it into the river. Next slide, please. So this map I wanted to show you guys, the first map is a treaty map. So as you may know, in Canada, we have treaties. So different treaties were signed in different regions. And so where it says 7, 6, and 8, that's in Alberta. And so if you look at this other map, this is a Government of Alberta map. These are the oil sands deposits in Alberta. And so in Fort McMurray, that's where the 19 tailings ponds are happening. But all of that oil sands area, there's massive destruction to ecosystems and to water that are currently happening. Next slide, please. So another map here, you can see this one shows rivers. And so where that little rectangle is, that is where the tar sands are. But you can see the rivers that come through there. And these rivers, I just wanted to again show They flow into a big lake called Lake Athabasca, and then into another big lake called the Great Slave Lake. The Great Slave Lake is one of the biggest lakes in the world. The second map shows you northern Alberta again. So it shows you the oil sands, or the tar sands as we call them. And they flow through northern Alberta into Northwest Territories, and then all the way out into the Arctic Ocean. And so anything that is dumped into the river from where it says the oil sands will flow through all of these northern Indigenous communities. All of these northern Indigenous communities are very tied to the water. So they travel on the water on a regular basis, hunting, fishing, trapping. So anything that goes into the water will affect the people and all of the wildlife and fish that depend on it. Next slide, please. So this slide, I just wanted to show you, just to briefly touch on cumulative impacts. There are massive cumulative impacts happening in Canada, in Alberta, in Northwest Territories. There's clear cutting, there's coal mining, there's this removal of wetlands. And so this picture here just shows you the pipeline impacts. That's just pipeline alone. And it's overwhelming when you see it on a map. These are all kinds of pipelines, but a lot of them are oil and gas pipelines. The second picture is an elder from Treaty 6, and this is his family had been fighting against clear cutting in their territory. And as you can see, the company did do clear cutting, and this is the elder looking at the devastation from the clear cutting. Next slide, please. So now I talked a little bit about the issues, and the issue that I wanted to highlight was the tailings ponds and the tar sands and how it's impacting our water, and that we're at a major threat right now because the government wants to dump these 19 toxic tailings ponds into our rivers. And I say this will be an international human rights crime. And this is how the communities are being impacted. So this man is Warren Simpson. He died of a rare cancer. He's from one of the northern communities that where the tar sands flow. He's just above that. And he had publicly stated that he feels that he got the cancer from the tar sands. Many of the communities in a community called Fort Chipewyan, they are getting rare cancers that you only see once in a million people in the world. They are getting them more often in their community, and they feel that it's from the water. This has been going on for decades now. And so this is one of the ways that the people are being impacted, is they're getting high rates of cancer from the water and from the pollution in the air. Next slide, please. This is Jean Lomcourt. She's with Keepers of the Water. She's one of our co-chairs. This is out in her cabin. The land around Jean Lomcourt's cabin was once miles away from the noise of the world. On long summer days, she would come with her mother to gather berries from the forest and to hunt moose when the leaves turned yellow and the air crisp. But over the last 2 decades, the cabin has been surrounded by expanding mines from the Alberta tar sands, where oil companies have dug vast open pits to extract a heavy form of crude called bitumen. Jean says her and her Indigenous community of Fort McKay, about 35 miles north of Fort McMurray, have watched as the companies have replaced their traditional lands with a 40-mile string of mines, stripping away subarctic boreal forest and wetlands and rerouting waterways. And a quote from her is, she said, "It's an invasion of our territory, an invasion of us trying to be out on the land." So she'll be out in her community in the forest trying to harvest medicines or berries. And there's these non-Indigenous people that are now all over their lands, and they will come to Jean and say, "What are you doing here?" Because they feel that now they own the land, that they have rights to the land. And Jean will say, "This is my land. What are you doing here?" The second map is really important for you guys to look at. Where it says Fort McKay, that is an indigenous community. Everything around it are huge industrial mines. So this community is completely surrounded by industrial mines. You have to drive through them every day to get to the town of Fort McMurray for the kids to go to school. So every day these kids pass these tailings ponds, and on the tailings ponds they have gunshots. So they have the sounds of gunshots because they're trying to keep the animals from going to these tailings ponds, and all of this pollution. And it's just like you're driving through, it's just, you have to see it sometimes to believe it. It's really overwhelming. Next slide, please. So now to talk about some of the solutions to protecting water, and this is some of the work that Keepers of the Water is doing or else we're supporting. So the Dene Nation, as you can see this map here, these are the Dene Nation, and it's a huge part of the Northwest Territories. And all of these Dene communities come together once a year for the Dene National Assembly. And they vote on things and they discuss issues because it's a large area of land. So in July of this summer, Keepers of the Water attended the Dene Assembly, and we talked about the issue that they want to start dumping these toxic chemicals into the water, which will flow in through all of these communities. They passed a resolution at that time to say that the Dene Nation opposes the release of treated tailings into the Decho, which is also known as the Mackenzie River, and they require Canada to abandon its plans to allow such action. So that's one of the solutions, is the nations are coming together to oppose this from happening. Next slide. Another big thing that's happening in Canada is Indigenous protected areas. And so this is one of the first Indigenous protected areas, DZ. It's a Dene National protected area. And the difference from a provincial or a government protected area is that Indigenous people manage the lands. They take care of the lands. So the governments, we're seeing a lot of non-Indigenous people, and the colonial governments, they don't like this because they want to maintain control over the lands. But we feel, and we support this, is that the only way to truly protect the future is to start returning the land back to Indigenous people. In Canada, Indigenous people only have 2% of the entire land of Canada. And so we know how to take care of the land. We're the original stewards of the land, from the instructions from Creator to protect water, to live in harmony with all living things. That's called natural law. And so in order for everybody to be sure that they have a future, they need to start working with Indigenous people, because we do take care of the land and we do take care of the water. Next slide. So more in solutions to protecting water, Keepers of the Water started a campaign that we are working with other organizations, other communities, to educate people that this is happening, that the companies want to start dumping these toxic tailings ponds into our rivers. And we are saying no. We are saying no to any dumping of any toxic chemicals into our rivers, and we're letting as many people know as possible. We also talk about healing, returning back to the land, and ceremonies. Ceremonies are very important in returning to our language and our culture and bringing our youth back to the land. So in order for us to understand why we need to protect the land and water, we need to be on the land and water, and we need to have our connection with the land and water. And we need to pray for the land and the water. So we have hosted healing walks right in where the tar sands are. We walk right by it. And we're going to be hosting another healing walk in 2023. And we invite you all to come. Visit our website. We'll have more information for that.
Disculpa, Jessie, un minuto para pasar a la siguiente presentación. Gracias.
Thank you. I didn't understand what you said.
I apologize. 1 minute.
Okay.
To complete your presentation. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Sorry. So sorry. One last solution I think is really important to mention is that we launched our own water monitoring program because the governments are so closely connected to the industry that we don't trust the information that they're giving us, and they're not giving us all the information to say where they're monitoring, what they're monitoring. And when we do see what they're monitoring, they're not monitoring in the right places that they need to. So Keepers of the Water, we launched our own water monitoring program, and we're starting to monitor the Athabasca River. You can go to my last slide. So for more information on the work that we do, you can visit our website. We have a Facebook page, we have a YouTube channel. In a very short time, I tried to tell you the main issue is that they're trying to dump toxic tailings into our river, and we're working very hard to stop that. Hi, kinanas nawao.
Muchas gracias, Jessie Cardinal, por presentarnos las
Thank you
experiencias.
very much for presenting your experiences on water use protection and how to make progress in these current situations from the nation of the world. What you are presenting is very important. Thank you very much. And due to a short period of time, we will go directly to the next presentation, which is by Virginia Leclerc. Virginia, you here?
I'm here.
Okay, muchas gracias. Virginia nos va a hablar
Thank you very much. Virginia is going to talk a little bit today about her presentation, the Dish, which means we will always protect the water.
Ojo, thank you for inviting me to your conversation. I know we have limited time to share, so I'll get right into it. As mentioned, I'm with the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. We're located in Northeast Kansas, which is on the southern plains of the US. And I guess I should start by explaining that some of our traditional ecological knowledge and connection as it relates to the land that we call home now, it's still fairly young and developing. We've only occupied the prairies here for about 200 years because we originally came from the Great Lakes area, which is over 600 miles away from where we are now. We were formerly woodland people and water and boat people by origin. But from 1829 to about 1867, we were relocated, and we spent those 30 years being forcibly marched and moved by the government to various locations until we finally settled here on the prairies of Kansas. And upon settlement, it was a place in an ecosystem completely different from our original homeland. So I mentioned this part of our history because it impacts the way that we now manage our land and water. First, and notably so, the resilience of our people during this time over the last 200 years and beyond was key to our survival. We adapted and learned to harvest new foods, medicines, and learn new lifeways, including water lifeways and water management practices. We weren't boat people anymore. We weren't water people anymore, and we had to develop a new identity. But in reflecting on our resilience and adaptation strengths, our department over the years, we've recognized the importance of researching and documenting the oral histories and the traditional ecological knowledge within our community. So we started including those oral histories in our key water and climate reports and our planning documents. Those accounts and oral histories, they not only give us a historical record and a picture of how our people live with the land and the water, but it also gives us a foundation and a start for our own continuous and imminent adaptation. We will have to continue to adapt. We know that, and having that record, it's a start for us. I also mentioned that part of our history because it's actually resulted in this kind of inherent longing for water and where we came from and who we used to be. It's shaped our water management goals today. And I guess one example that I'd give is we recently completed a wetland restoration project on the reservation. We returned 31 acres of cropland back to its natural wetland state. And along with all the ecological benefits of the wetland, we were most excited about the traditional harvesting opportunities. When planning the project, a few of our tribal leaders wanted wild rice plantings at the wetlands. And wild rice is, of course, a traditional crop from the north. And, you know, our department, we knew it couldn't be sustained here, but we really appreciated the enthusiasm from our tribal leadership. And although we weren't able to grow wild rice, we are going to be able to harvest more of a particular tuber, which is a valued food source to our Potawatomi people. And then there's also going to be reed grass, which we once utilized to weave cultural domestic items. So that's going to be an exciting opportunity for us. And then another species, and it's not harvested, but it's important to our culture, are the water birds. And water birds have a significant place and spiritual value in our old stories. So we're looking forward to the return of the water birds with this wetland restoration as well. For this project, we mostly worked with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Environmental Protection Agency. And the really positive thing about this partnership, or the partnerships, were that neither agency expected us to provide cultural information that we considered private or protected or otherwise questioned our restoration goals. We didn't have to justify our traditional goals with conventional science. The agencies respected our boundaries, and we appreciated that partnership and trust. And ultimately, I think that the Wetlands Project and partnership proved that when our traditional goals and our practices and, you know, that longing that we had for our history can align somehow with modern science and conservation practices, then good things can happen. And that's all that I wanted to share. And again, I appreciate the invitation, Iguian.
Muchísimas gracias, Virginia Leclerc.
Thank you very much, Virginia Leclerc. She has explained on her presentation about that project. I would like to mention that Virginia graduated in the Haskell Indian Nations University and Baker University, and she has served the tribe's Planning and Environmental Protection Department in various capacities over the past 22 years. She has worked in the areas of environmental education, outreach, land use inventory, solid waste, and air quality, among others. Virginia is also a delegate to the Region 7 Joint Tribal Operations Committee and an alternate delegate to the National Tribal Caucus. Thank you very much, Virginia. Have reached the end of the presentation. Thank you very much to our distinguished panel members for their valuable presentations, and continue with the struggle to protect our Mother Earth. We have received some questions through the Slido app, and I would like to start and interactive discussion to address the questions that have been posed by the audience. You can keep on sending your questions through the QR code that we shared with you a while ago. And due to time restrictions, we will only be able to answer some of the questions. There is a question directly to Lynn Morrison. One participant or attendee said, where did the exchange take place, the exchange that you mentioned in your presentation? And if you could please elaborate on this a little bit. Please be brief in your answers so we can answer as many questions as we can. Thank you so much.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you for the question. So the two groups that participated were KUA, and some of the members, it was through a virtual exchange. So some of the members were taking place on Molokai, Oahu, and Hawaii. And then Kwalmita Secwepemc, we took part at Tecumseh Secwepemc at one of our buildings, also in Sink First Nations, which is one of our northern Secwepemc signatory communities. Part of the purpose was just providing the opportunity for the elders and youth to experience that cultural learning opportunities that they would not have within school. So the exchange was recorded, and we were hoping to continue on the work, hopefully meeting next year with KUA and continuing on with the Summer Guardians, with the high school Summer Guardians.
Muchas gracias, Lynn Morrison.
Thank you so much, Lynn Morrison. Now we also have a question for Pierre Olivier. A person just asked, how has this acknowledgement moved forward? That is acknowledging the earth, the indigenous knowledge, and other established knowledge for the river. As I said in my presentation, the next stages are the construction of the Guardian Committee, where the Guardians will be included. We are going to have a
structure de gouvernance aussi, dans lequel, par exemple, on va pouvoir penser à
where we will be able to discuss different topics and which individuals will be part of the institutional process that could
toute cette structure-là. Si on regarde, par exemple,
the activities that prevent any damages in the Pangwangi River in New Zealand, there is a co-management structure between the first the Maori First Nations and government authorities, so we can have a co-management with the local community, the municipality, the First Nations, and also Quebec at a governmental level. Thank you so much. We hope we answered your questions. Now we have a question for Adriana. Adriana, the question is as follows. Can you please mention how the information was collected for the case study you presented, and how are you going to use these documents in the future? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the question. This was done through three specific interviews, So this was one of the strategies, collecting the information through the interviews. This is just an exploratory work to consolidate it. The future goal will be to take pictures, to have an artistic intervention that can collect and systematize this process as a whole. And this is a long-term project. We are just at the beginning of this process, and after this, we will continue with the research. We will continue digging in. So this is the answer. Thank you very much, Adriana. We also have a question for Josefina, Jesse, and with this, we will finish this round, and then we will continue with the final words by Kathy. So this is a question for Josefina. Josefina, can you please elaborate a little bit more on the essential needs of capacity for the communities to move forward in terms of their problems or issues they face? Maybe, Josefina, you can turn on your microphone so we can listen to you. I don't know if you're talking about the regulations within the community. Is that the question you asked? Yes, please, the challenges that you have faced in your community from your own point of view. Well, making people aware of the importance of the water use. Water use is not an individual action. It has to be a community action where we all participate. That is collecting water, using water, enjoying water, as well as implementing the relevant technology. For instance, dripping irrigation, and also see how the companies behave, the companies around us. We have a Canadian mining company next to us, Maya Silver, which is one of the main challenge or threat to our region due to the mining activity in our municipalities. Thank you very much, Josefina, for answering. And also now there is a question to Jessie. Jessie, from your own point of view, what has changed in the way we collectively see and manage the water resources from your current perspective versus the perspective you had when you were a child? What changes have you experienced?
Well, it goes back to before I was a child. It was we're only a generation or two removed from our water. So even my mom was able to drink clean water as a child. There wasn't such a thing as chemically treated water. And so that has changed to where it's acceptable and normal that your water needs to be treated to drink it. And so with Keepers of the Water, what we're saying is the standard of clean water is that you can go to the lake, to the river, or to the stream and drink the water. And so that's what we're going back for now. So that's how I would say it has changed, is now it's normalized to have chemically treated water. That's not normal. That's not what clean water is. I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm sorry, this is a question that we got from the audience, and I think that you did answer the question. Thank you so much, Jessie. And I have another question to end this Q&A session for Virginia. Virginia, are there any collaboration agreements in writing with the USDA and with the EPA from the US that show the respect to your methods and that do not need any conventional scientific approach? Can you please share information on that? Thank you so much.
Sure. We haven't established formal written agreements with the USDA or EPA defining or recognizing our use of TEK. The successful integration of our traditional goals into this wetlands project recently was largely due to the people involved. We were really fortunate to have a local USDA representative who worked really hard to establish trust and good relations with the tribe. But I do believe that written partnership agreements recognizing our use of TEK and our historical and traditional values would be really beneficial for future projects. I mean, that's not always guaranteed that we'll have the best liaisons, working with us. So I think written agreements would be a great idea.
Muchas gracias, Virginia. Hemos recibido
Thank
muchas
you
más.
so much, Virginia. We have received many other questions, but because of time restrictions, we will not be able to answer all of them, but we will answer them through email. Thank you very much to all the panelists, and thank you very much to all the attendees that they texted their questions also. We would like to thank the expert group of traditional ecological knowledge. And I would like to ask Kathy Hudson Smith, a spokesperson of the group of experts in traditional ecological knowledge, to give us some farewell words and to officially conclude this space for dialogue. Thank you very much. Kathy, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yolanda, for your excellent work today. I want to thank everyone for the hard work that you're doing and for coming here today to share that with us. It's very moving and very inspiring to hear all the work that you're putting in. There are many things I learned from you today. I learned of the importance of establishing cultural frameworks, that is the work of the community, and that that work needs to be supported. The importance of involving local leaders, elders, youth, and women in the work that we're doing. I hear you talking about that. I see that you are all exploring methods for interacting with, in cultural appropriate ways and ways that meet the needs of your community. I note that you are all embracing available technology for the use of to the betterment of your community, and you are developing local institutions to interface with governments. And I think you're taking the best opportunity to develop legal systems and cause the legal regime to respond to the needs of the community. So, the engagement of our Indigenous laws is such an important task. We thank you again for all of your excellent work. We'll all be reviewing your work with great care and look forward to seeing you at CEC projects in the future, so we can stay on top of your work, and perhaps there is support that you can gain from us in the work that we do. Thank you again.
Muchísimas gracias a Kathy Hudson Smith, vocera
Thank you very much, Kathy Hudson Smith, spokesperson,
y a los otros miembros de este grupo que hoy nos
and the other members of this group that have joined this session. I am also a member of an Indigenous community. Thank you very much to all our distinguished panelists and all the people that joined us from different parts of the world. On behalf of the CEC and the members of the group of experts in traditional ecological knowledge, we would like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation in this dialogue. We expect it was useful. We would also like to thank everyone who helped us with this event, interpreters, communications department, and especially my colleagues Marcela and Mariana. And we would like to ask you finally to answer the survey, where we will be able to see what your opinion is to improve our work, and we can make these events more productive for you. To access the survey, please use the QR code on the screen. It's in 3 different languages. Please scan the language of your preference. Your opinion is extremely important for us. Finally, I would like to thank all of you, and I would like to thank all that we will have this video available in the CEC's website, and we will also provide the link for the panel members and attendees. Thank you very much.